fired from the Council of Justice, dismissed from the Order of Heroes. Do you want a supervillain? Because this is how you get a supervillain. I turned off the ignition, thumping my head against the wheel a few times before turning off the lights and stepping out. It was a cool night. The sky above my home was clear, a few stars visible through the city's haze bleeding up the mountain from below. I could see it all from here: the skyscrapers, the slums, the never-ending streets and lights. One block of the city was oddly dark, hard to have light when Pulse had fried all the electrics in a square mile, all for the sake of stopping a single robbery. If she had just listened, then all the people in that hospital. I took a deep breath, more of a sigh than an appreciation of the fresh mountain air. I'd dedicated everything to the city, to them, and for what? I turned to walk up the path to my front door. No one was waiting to welcome me home. No smiling wife, no noisy, happy kids, no one to share a drink with, to tell I was fired today, that my career was down the drain and that I'd wasted my prime. Just a big, dark, and empty house. "Professor," a cool voice said from somewhere as I reached for the lock. My blood ran cold. "Ballisto." He stepped out of the shadows, a dark hulk of a man dressed in a skin-tight black suit that could grow as his muscles did, rapidly. He was one of the city's biggest heroes, in every sense. I'd always wondered just how big he could get, and how the power could also manipulate the air around him. "I'm sure you can guess why I'm here." I blinked. "To come and have a drink? To listen to my woes?" "I don't know, Ballisto. As much as I've monitored your performance over the years, I can't say we were close." The monitoring device that normally sat upon his shoulder was missing. "Well, you could say this is a sort of farewell." "Are you leaving? Joining another city's team?" I pretended to itch my midriff, clicking a button on the underside of my belt. Ballisto's mask moved, a smile, as much as I could guess. "We had reports of supervillains in this area, so I came to investigate. You can guess the rest." Air was swirling around us now, and Ballisto was growing, from 6 feet to 9, 10. Next would come the pressure change, which would build and build until, like a detonation, it would implode. Then he would use brute force to finish the job. I knew the pattern all too well. And there were no villains here. He raised his hand in the direction of the house. My ears popped. There was the pressure change. "I'm sorry, Professor. Council orders." I scoffed. He had no sorrow in his heart. It was as black as his suit. "Save me your pity, Ballisto." He paused, his head cocking to one side, perhaps confused at my out-of-character utterance. I knew he would be smiling still, his heartbeat rising rapidly, as it always did when he went for the kill. But there would be no pleasure for him here. I let out a deep breath as the air pressure suddenly returned to normal, the swirling wind dropping to a mere breeze. Ballisto's body shrunk back to its natural size like a deflating balloon. He stared at his hand as if it were broken, and then looked around, before suddenly freezing. It was like he had seen a ghost. And he had. My creation landed in the space between us, feet gracefully touching down on the ground without a sound. I decided to dress him in gray nanofiber mesh to offset the pale complexion of his skin. His silver hair was a side effect of the process, as were his silvery blue eyes, but its style and the handsomely rugged features of his face were all the same as they had once been. Enough, at least, for Ballisto to recognize him. "Null, you're meant to be dead." He basically was, as far as I could tell, but I didn't wish to over-explain things to the brainless. Better they think he's alive. Null's face remained expressionless. "Yes, he is meant to be, Ballisto. Just another true hero who was silenced by the Council for the threat his powers posed to them." Ballisto didn't listen. He started to run at Null, arms raised. Null had been physically weak before, but now... Null's fist moved. A boom of air seemed to hit Ballisto in his torso, the sound echoing. He slumped, groaning. What the? I smiled. It was so delightful to see the abuser's power used by the abused. I couldn't help myself. I felt a monologue building. Dare I indulge? How does it feel, Ballisto, to be hurt by the very power you wield? He used my power. How? Ballisto spat. I laughed. Null's power always had vast potential, I began, circling Ballisto's prone form. It is why he suffered the fate he did. Ballisto tried to stand but failed, resorting instead to a cold glare. What did you do to him? I smiled. A few helping modifications, that's all. It was not difficult to unlock the true potential I sometimes glimpsed in my data. You see, not only can he nullify the effect of a power. Null walked off aimlessly down the garden path, attracted to the lights of the city. Null! He spun to face me. I pointed at Ballisto. Twice. Slowly, he nodded and walked back into position, and raised his hand. Ballisto flinched. I cleared my throat. Indeed, not only can he nullify the power, air began swirling around Null's hand, but use it as well. Ballisto touched his ear, his voice desperate. Command, I need backup at the professor's residence. He stopped, realizing the distinct lack of signal. Yes, you'll find that signal is rather lacking in these parts, Ballisto. I narrowed my eyes at him, vengeance cooling my blood. As is mercy. Professor. I nodded to Null and turned away. As I unlocked my front door and walked inside, there were a few booms and crashes, and then silence. Hand trembling, I poured myself a drink and waited in the kitchen. A short moment later, Null walked in and sat on the couch, staring at the wall, his favorite part of the wall, by all accounts. Taking a big swig of whiskey, I pressed a button under the bar. Shutters began to slide down the windows. I doubted the council would act too quickly once they realized Ballisto had failed, but it was better to be cautious. Pulling the control module from my pocket, I extended Null's power to a mile radius. According to the stats it was giving me, Ballisto's power was still available. Interesting. Most interesting. Grabbing more whiskey and an extra glass, I made my way to the upstairs balcony. I wanted to watch when they sent their most corrupt, most mobile heroes to investigate. Seeing them drop out of the sky as they neared would be most entertaining. I summoned Null, and when he arrived, passed him a glass. It was only right that he enjoyed this too. Maybe we do a shot for each one that falls? Null stared at the glass, and then swallowed the whiskey in one gulp. Slow down there, fella, I said, slapping his back. I poured us another, and then turned back to the cityscape. Hey, perhaps Ballisto had been right, I thought with a smile. Maybe there was a supervillain here after all. And more than that. I looked at Null. Maybe there was someone I could enjoy a drink with.